I know you've talked about this before, at least in some Facebook videos. Do you want to give a couple of like the highlight points of why you decided to live in Brazil and not the US?
Yeah, so basically, I was really unhappy in the United States. I guess I was stuck in a rut. It was the same thing every day, and there was all these empty promises of go to college, get a job, buy a house, and that's how it's going to work for you if you just follow that. And I wanted something different. And coming down here to Brazil, things are definitely a lot harder here financially, and I think that helps people sort of enjoy life more because they're not out busy, buying all the new iPhones or trying to or buying new clothes. It's a lot less materialistic. There is definitely another side of it where it's showing off. If you have a new iPhone, people are gonna be like, "Oh wow, look at that." I just feel like life is a lot simpler here and it's a lot less rushed. As soon as I land in Boston, every time I go back to visit family, I can feel like I don't know if it's an electricity or some sort of energy, and it honestly makes me like anxious, but it's also makes me want to work and get things done. I always feel like I'm not doing enough, and it could be just
Yeah.
Boston. It could because I don't like to say it's the United States because I've only really ever lived in Massachusetts, and that's just Eastern Massachusetts. So I don't want to say that my experience is going to be the same for everyone in all parts of the country. But I definitely
Yeah.
found where I'm happy here.
Yeah, I can definitely attest to more or less the same thing in the Carolinas. I definitely agree with you that my anxiety levels kind of kick up a notch when I'm in the States. I don't know if that's from being around friends and family or just having this like weird set of expectations put on me, but I always feel like I gotta run, like do stuff now because everyone's doing stuff and it stresses me out, man.
For sure.
Are there any other big differences that you see between Brazil and the US? They don't necessarily have to be like positive or negative reasons why you're living in Brazil, but just like any notable differences that you've kind of perceived over the years?
Oh yeah, definitely. There's the just the people in general, and I know that Brazil is full of different kinds of people, and there's all these different regions with very unique cultures. But as a whole, I see that Brazilians are a lot more friendly than at least the people I
Hmm.
see in Boston. Again, I can't even compare to the South because I've the most south the farthest south I've been is Washington D.C. So it's not even considered the South. But people in Boston are really just cold. They don't look at you. It's quick, short conversations that really have as little falseness to them as possible. And that's what I grew up with. So maybe someone from here is going to think, "Oh, that's awful. Like, how rude can these people be?" So people are definitely more friendly here. At the same time, there will be people at the supermarket, not the same people who ask me about my documents, but they'll they'll be like, "Oh, how's your family?" That's the first question before they even ask me my name. it's I guess they're good. it's
Yeah.
Do I know you? Have you seen them before? It's a weird sense of familiarity, and this isn't even a small town. I think there's I want to say there's almost 700,000 people in this city.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, and
Damn.
I say I'm
Yeah,
from
that's a big
Boston,
city.
but I'm actually from a city just south of Boston. Same way everyone's gonna just say they're from the region. But my city, for example, Quincy, has 90,000. So there's like 7 times the amount of people here, and yet they treat it a lot like a smaller town.
Yeah. So I think this is good to point out to probably the majority of our listeners that it's not uncommon the situation that you've never been farther south than Washington D.C. I've been to Boston one time when my plane was laid over, but I know nothing about Boston. You know nothing about South Carolina, and that's totally normal for Americans. America's a big, big country, and in general, we have no idea what's going on in other parts of the country.
And like I'll extend that even to other parts of the world because we're not exposed to really any other countries. People will here in Brazil talk about chaves and stuff, and they'll say, "Oh, it's from Mexico." Like, how do you not know it? We barely watch things that are from maybe even England or Australia. Like, we're not exposed to much of the world as much as we expose ourselves to the world. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yes, definitely does. Yeah, so one of the first episodes that we recorded one episode about positive American stereotypes and then another one about negative American stereotypes. And one of the negative American stereotypes that I think is definitely true, I was trying to defend it a little bit, but I think it's true, is Americans are kind of geographically dumb. Like we don't know what's going on in the world. It's a stereotype, but there's a lot of truth to it. I don't know if you would agree with that or not.
I don't know which state it was. It was like a Miss North Carolina. I know. I think it was one of the
That was
South
South Carolina.
South Carolina. And even I was hoping it wasn't. I was hoping it was the other Carolina. But yeah,
Nope.
that that whole little pageant speech is just, it doesn't describe every single person, but it's a pretty good idea of what people think. I mean, even my sister, she's only 14, but even still, she asked me maybe earlier this year. She's like, "Are there roads in Brazil?" I'm like, "No, I actually have to, climb through the trees and hack my way through the jungle just to get to the supermarket." Of course, there are roads. Like we have the trains in Sao Paulo. Some of them are much better quality than what we have in Boston. And people are just like, "Oh, really? Wow, they have trains.
Well, look at them. Ooh.
They're catching up to us." Like as if everyone's trying to become the United States.
I don't completely remember what Miss South Carolina said. I think I've tried to mentally block it out of my brain, but I remember it was so stupid, and she started talking about, like, the Iraq War.
Oh yeah, I remember she
It's
said
terrible.
the Iraq, and I was like, "Yeah, what is the Iraq?" And it was
Why
something about
why is there an article in front of that word?
yeah. I think if I'm not wrong, the question was like a certain percent of Americans can't find the United States on a map. What do you think should be done about this and for education? And the Iraq. That was the answer.
Oh, boy. Yeah. Our state is not being well represented right now in American politics. Alright, alright. So you were talking about the fact that Brazilians are really friendly. You kinda have this sense of familiarity and community even in a big city like San Jose. At the same time, I get this a lot from my students that, "Oh, it's really hard to make friends with Americans because they're a little colder or more reserved or something." But in my personal experience, it was really hard to make friends in Brazil, at least for me. I don't know how you feel about that.
Oh no, yeah, definitely. I've been here in this apartment for, I'd say, maybe a year and a half. Wow, that's fast. And I've made one friend. There's actually maybe, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say three. I know I sound like Mr. Popular over here. Um,
Hey, slow down there.
and it was all just very recently when I'm trying to branch out more. I even went to this bar we have that is an English only bar. Everyone was speaking Portuguese there. I was a little let down, but even, I was just trying to throw myself out there to make friends. And I don't know if it's necessarily the Brazilians' fault. Like I definitely don't want to put blame on either side here, but I think as Americans we have like a bubble of personal space that's a lot bigger than what we have in Brazil. We kind of expect to make like either casual friends or we don't even know how to go up to people. And then you have the Brazilians who will just hug you as soon as they meet you. I find it hard to approach people and also maintain conversations because I'll text someone and then I won't respond for the rest of the day until later that night. Just the whole culture of having friendships here is different. It's not better, it's not worse. It's just there's different standards. So it's a lot of learning on how to be a friend.
Yeah, that's deep. I think that's a good thing to point out for our listeners, though, is you speak Portuguese extremely well, more or less perfectly. You've spent a lot of time in Brazil. You've been in the same small town, in the same apartment for a year and a half now, and you have 1 to 3 friends approximately.
Yeah.
And I have so many students that do, like, a language exchange for 3 weeks in Los Angeles, and they're like, "Yeah, Americans are mean. I didn't make any friends." And I was like, "Dude, I have, like, 5 friends in Brazil, and they're pretty much all friends of my girlfriend." So
Like I feel bad for them, people who do that and then come back thinking Americans are mean because I don't even want to defend it and be like, oh, it's not all Americans. I'd feel bad for them. Like, I'll be your friend. Yeah, I think we're a lot more, I don't know if it's reserved. No, we're definitely reserved. A lot of our friendships and whatnot have started to just be more online things. Even with
Yeah.
me, I don't leave the house too much because of my job. And the friends I have are mostly just pen pals at this point.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's definitely a dynamic of the idea of friendship is different in Brazil and the US. But I think there's another thing at play that is just it's hard to make friends when you're an adult. Like most of my friends in the US are either like childhood friends or friends that like from former workplaces that were kind of just put into my friend group. Like I did not have to actively go out and make those friendships.
Definitely, even with
And
childhood friends, it's like a similar situation with school.
exactly. I mean, honestly, I don't, off the top of my head, I can't really think of any friends of mine that I like proactively made completely outside of work or school. The only exception would probably be Alexia and her friends, but that's it. Yeah, so if anybody wants to be our friends,
We are here. We have United States and Brazil represented. So